It is so good to see you. Okay, quick moment of transparency. How many of you have felt rushed at some point in your life? How many of you are still short of breath from running in here today? There's a couple of examples that come to mind for me, and most of them are embarrassing. How many of us have ever shouted at the microwave for taking too long to heat our microwave dinner? You ever looked at a package and been like, 90 seconds, who has that kind of time? How about this one? This one's really embarrassing. Have you ever shouted at a red light for taking too long? Okay, added bonus. How many of you have shouted at a red light, peeled away from it once it turned green, only to be caught at the next red light? Anyone? Okay, so full disclosure, if that's ever you, I'm the person next to you laughing at you. I don't know what's wrong with me. It's something sick in the head. But how many of us go throughout our day screaming at the microwave or yelling at the red light only to go home and binge watch Modern Family for 4 hours, right? Isn't that a strange dichotomy? We're always in a hurry so we can get home and do maybe next to nothing. I think that's fascinating in how we're wired and how our culture tells us to use our time. I want you to imagine that each of us had an app on our phone that count down the years, months, weeks, days, and hours we had left to live. That'd be pretty sobering, wouldn't it? I mean, the reviews would probably be a bit depressing. But imagine if you had that on your phone and you always knew exactly how much time you had left. And what if you woke up this morning, you looked at your phone, opened that app, and it read 24 hours? How would that change the way that you spent that day? What would you do with your time if you knew you only had 24 hours left to live? In fact, why don't you turn to your neighbor real quick. Tell them what you would do. What would you do with that 24 hours? Be honest. Okay, so there's some laughter over here, but some crying over here. And I just heard someone shout, Modern Family. Well done. So today, we want to challenge one another to be intentional about how we spend our time. In fact, we're gonna put a countdown timer on the screen right here, counting down 24 hours. And I promise I won't take any more than 2 of them. Some of you are new and like, is he joking? I can't tell if he's joking. I guess you'll find out. This, by the way, is a preacher's nightmare, right? A big projected countdown timer for everyone to see. But if you had 24 hours, what would you want to take time for before that timer ran out? We're actually wrapping up our series today called Love Does, and we've been exploring what it means to truly love. And we said that if you want to know what love is, you have to go to the source of love. And one of Jesus' close friends is a man named John, and he put it this way, that God is love. Ontologically, it is his essence. He doesn't just know a thing or two about it, but he is himself love. Now, for some of you, that may not be all that helpful, but fortunately for us, God's love became visible through the person of Jesus Christ. If you want to know what love is, look to God. And if you want to know what God is like, look to Jesus. And in Jesus, we see something beautiful. It's that love does. It's not passive, it's active. It doesn't wait on the sidelines. It's intentional and focused. Love takes time. Now, I'm sure most of us are pretty aware of time, at least at some level. A lot of us wear time on our wrist. We have clocks on our phone. In fact, sometimes when I'm bored, I'll walk by a clock just to pass the time. I'm embarrassed for me. I apologize. But maybe you've said something like this. Time feels like it's just slipping away. or time feels like it's going so fast, or time really flies. But you know the one that I hear most often is this, and maybe you can finish this sentence. Wow, where did the time go? Exactly. Now the simple answer is that it went away. It's gone somewhere else. But I would venture to guess that every single one of us have felt that sinking feeling of letting time get away from us, of not making time for the things that matter most to us. And especially on a day like today where we're dedicating children, I would not guess that any parent would like to look back on their life and say, wow, I really didn't focus on the things that mattered most. So how can we be intentional with our time, the time that we have, this gift of breath and vitality that God has given to us? How can we be more intentional about this? I actually think Jesus understood this notion of time flying. I mean, Jesus lived roughly 33 years on this earth and spent the first 30 of them in relative obscurity. For those of you mathematicians, that's 3 years for all of his teachings and healings and miracles and lessons and ministry. Jesus understood the significance of time. And here's what I love so much about Jesus. That even with all of the demands on his time and energy, he is always making space to stop, to pause, to crouch down low, to look into the eyes, to hear the stories over and over again. He models for us that love takes time. Here are a couple of examples. On one occasion, Jesus was on his way to go visit a dying girl. And a woman who had been bleeding for 12 years reaches out, grabs his cloak. And now Jesus could have kept on moving. No, I have things to do, but he doesn't. He stops, he crouches down low. He not only heals this woman, but he hears her story. On another occasion, he's headed to Jerusalem just a few hours before his execution. He's likely tired and stressed and anxious and sad. And it says that along the way, he encounters a blind beggar on the side of the road. And with everything weighing in on him, again, what does he do? He stops, he pauses, and he makes time. On another occasion, Jesus visits the home of Mary and Martha. Perhaps you've heard the story. 2 sisters with very different temperaments. And while Martha is consumed with all the tasks of the house, Mary spends time with Jesus. Now, real talk, there's a lot of me that connects with Martha, right? Jesus is coming over. We can't serve him leftovers. Maybe we pull out the vacuum before he shows up. This is a big deal for our home. But Jesus says Mary has made the right choice. I think some of us might be really excited to hear this morning that the dishes can wait. And those are just a few examples of how Jesus models that love takes time. But I think my favorite encounter is in Matthew 19. And in Matthew 19, verse 13, it says, "One day, some parents brought their children to Jesus so he could lay his hands on them and pray for them. But the disciples scolded the parents for bothering him." So that request doesn't seem all that crazy, does it? I mean, we literally just modeled that on this very stage. Laying on hands, prayer, and blessing is a powerful, powerful moment. And I don't want to chastise the disciples too hard because honestly, I think they were probably just trying to protect Jesus. Maybe he had a long day, maybe he's feeling stressed out, and they're just trying to keep from one more demand weighing in on him. But there's another thing you should know culturally. In the ancient Near East, children were way down on the ladder. They couldn't really carry their own. They didn't carry a lot of value in the community. And so imagine you're a parent. You hear this rabbi coming to town. You think, he must bless my child. He must pray for him. He must lay hands on her. So as you approach Jesus, you can't quite get there, and the disciples scold you and say, he doesn't have time. But Jesus does what he often does. He flips everything upside down and does something that no one would expect. Verse 14 says, but Jesus said, let the children come to me. Don't stop them. And then he goes on, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to those who are like these children. So not only, bring him in, I'll tolerate them. He said, no. They understand something about the kingdom that we adults often struggle with. So before the parents have an opportunity to walk away defeated, Jesus said, no. Bring him in close. He gathers the children. I imagine he even maybe like extended the selfie stick and like Snapchatted for a moment with the children there. Jesus was often living out ways that were remarkably counter to his culture. In fact, in the very next verse, Jesus lays his hands on them. For a Jewish audience, this is a way of declaring worth and value and significance, and everyone would have felt it. In this moment, he's sending a clear picture that he has time for those that the world would see as weak or vulnerable or maybe just less important. So I have to ask, who are those people in our lives? Right? It might not just be children. What if it's the guy that bags your groceries at the grocery store that you just don't feel like you have time for? What if it's the neighbor on the other side of the block that's just a little weird? I'm amazed at how much even 10 seconds of intentionality with the drive-thru person can entirely change their tone. Who are those people in our lives that we just don't simply notice or make time for or recognize? A couple years ago, I actually wanted to conduct a month-long experiment for myself just to find someone in culture that fit that description, overlooked, easily ignored, and just sort of spend a month trying to care for them specifically. So I landed on toll booth workers, because who's more ignored and overlooked than toll booth workers, right? They see thousands of people all day long, and probably the most interaction they get from anybody is, right? And then that's probably it. And so I was dating Katie at the time, and so I was driving into the city a lot, and so I decided to not use my iPass and to pay with cash, to go through the toll booth every single time. And what happened was I actually ended up getting the same toll booth lady a couple times in a row, even though she changed booths. And she recognized me, maybe because my car was purple, but maybe because I'm nice, I don't know. And so through 15-second interactions over the course of a few weeks, we began to develop a little bit of a relationship. She was a sweet old woman named Rose. Well, I was driving down into the city on Valentine's Day, and I thought, I'm gonna make a card for Rose, just on the off chance that I might actually run into her. And would you guess, I pulled in, and little Rose's head popped over the counter. And I said, Rose, happy Valentine's Day. I made this card for you. And her eyes welled up with tears, and she let out this noise, and then she climbed out of the window to give me the most awkward bear hug of my life. I can only imagine what the car behind me was thinking. Like, that little old lady's gonna murder that man in the purple car. But I'll never forget that interaction. And as a culture, I think we're all pressured to move faster and faster, to do more and more, but how do we slow down in order to connect with one another? Now, this can sound like trying to add one more thing to an overstuffed schedule, but this is the Jesus mission. Like, what do I want for my family? Redemption. What do I want for my neighbor? Redemption. What do I want for the clerk or the cashier? Redemption. And we get to make the invisible Christ visible through how we make time for others, how we love them, how we embrace them, how we speak to them, how we serve them. So how do we actually become more intentional? How do we step off this treadmill of always adding one more thing? Simply put, we have to be intentional to choose the best over the good. We've got to choose the best over the good. Now, obviously, we still sometimes have to do the dishes or mow the grass or go grocery shopping. But there are times, though, where we need to choose connection over completion. Choose connection over completion. I've been doing some research about everyday tasks around the house, and I found something fascinating. I think it's gonna blow your mind. Are you ready for this bit of insight? Here it is, brace yourself. Those everyday tasks in our life, they never stop. Dishes keep getting dirty, grass keeps on growing. Now, this may rattle some of us. Some of us need to simply let the dishes be dirty. Can I get an amen? Amen? Sometimes those tasks need to wait in order for us to connect with those that mean the most to us, or those who are so easily overlooked, or those who are feeling vulnerable and alone. Think back to the story of Mary and Martha. Right, like Martha was cleaning. She was doing good stuff. It wasn't like Martha was like selling drugs or selling Nickelback CDs or something terrible. Like, she's doing good things. She's preparing for Jesus. She was focused on the good, but missing the best. Listen to how Luke records it. This is Jesus. He says, "My dear Martha, you're worried and upset over all these details. There's only one thing worth being concerned about, and Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken from her." Now, this does not mean that each time we choose connection, that it will go swimmingly. Many of us have probably felt the sting of trying to carve out intentional time, and it kind of flopped a bit. Anyone know what I'm talking about? It won't always be the end of a Lifetime movie or a Hallmark card. Sometimes it just doesn't go according to plan. I'm really not very good at this. But ever since we were dating, Katie and I decided to carve out once a week a date night, to do our best to protect once a week. This is for us to date. Now, sometimes that's like a romantic night in the town. Sometimes that's a bunch of Netflix, I gotta be honest. But early on, I had planned this big date for date night. I was gonna take her on like a 15-mile bike excursion. And in Elgin, there was a guy who apparently bought a castle tower, flew it over, and had it on the Fox River, sort of just taking up space. He lives somewhere in the neighborhood. I tracked him down, got him to convince me to let him use the key so I could climb up this tower and take Katie on a romantic dinner. So we ride our bikes and we arrive at the castle. Now, this isn't the full castle here, but that's the wall, or that's the small tower, and just on the other side is the full, huge tower. Next slide, you see me joyously at the top of the tower. And this was taken right before one of the most traumatizing moments of my life. I'm up in the tower. I'm feeling great. I made it. We made it before sunset. I'm the best boyfriend ever. I'm crushing this. I'm waving down at Katie, she's waving up at me, and then she says, "Hey, what's with all that dirt around your head?" And I look back, I go, "Dirt? What dirt?" And I turn around to see not dirt, but a swarm of 500 killer wasps beginning to surround me. And the entrance to this castle tower was a hatch which had fallen shut. And so they start stinging and start stinging again. And I'm responding very manly, of course. No, I'm screaming like a child. I'm like, "Oh, it hurts. It hurts so bad. It hurts so bad." I'm trying to be romantic in this moment. She's like, "What do I do?" And I'm like, "I don't know. They're hurting me. It hurts so bad." She finally climbed the ladder, pushed the hatch up so I could climb back down, and then equip myself to seek my revenge here in the next shot. There's me preparing to go back and fight my enemy. I, of course, lost again. I had something like 125 sting marks that had begun to bleed. And what I should have done was go to the hospital. But of course I didn't. I was like, no, this date will not be ruined. We're gonna watch the sunset. And so we laid down a blanket, we watched the sunset, and I passed out. It was terrifying. Things will not always go as we planned or hoped, but we have to be intentional about not letting the good choke out the best. A second way we can be intentional is to choose quality over quantity. Quality over quantity. Now, I'm not suggesting that you hide in a cave and stop calling your friends like in a sort of absence makes the heart grow fonder moment. What I'm saying is we need to pick our spots. Gary Chapman wrote this brilliant book called The 5 Love Languages. If you've not read it, I highly recommend it. And he talks about this idea of quality time. Again, the love language I'm not very good at personally. And in describing what it is, he talks about a mother sitting on the floor playing ball with her child. He said she could do that for hours, but if she's on the phone or doing her taxes or watching TV, that doesn't register as quality time. In fact, he goes on to say this: quality time is not the activity itself, but the emotions that are created between the mother and her child. It's about focusing ourselves to choose quality time, not just quantity. He goes on to suggest a couple of different elements of quality time. One, quality conversations. Taking time to actually learn feelings and emotions and hopes and dreams and fears. Number two, gentlemen, listen up. Quality listening. Not trying to fix each other's problems all the time, but seeking to be fully present, to understand the other person's perspective. And then lastly, quality activities. Quality activities. I don't know that it actually matters all that much what you do, but choosing the types of activities that point back to the first two, where you can have listening and conversation. Now, there's one final way that we can choose the best over the good. But before I tell you, I'm going to give you a little hint.
Yeah, I think the internet just went down.
Huh. I'll just give it a sec. We'll come back.
Something just happened in the world, and we have no idea what it was. Please come back, internet. I love you. I love you so much. Just come back, please, please.
How are you?
Fine. How are you?
I'm fine.
Oh, good.
Yeah, good. Good.
This is great.
Yeah, I was talking.
We don't need this.
No.
We never do this anymore.
No. I'm just gonna leave it up.
Yeah,
Just in case it does come back.
Just to be sure.
Honey, is the internet back yet?
Yes!
Okay, so I'm obviously not saying that technology is evil. I post on Facebook more than those who do CrossFit, I realize. I love technology. I love that I can text my brother a random meme with a kitten for no reason at all. I love that I can watch my other brother raise his little girls via Instagram. I think it's a great tool for staying connected and engaged, but the problem is when the good thing chokes out the best thing, which is why we need to sometimes choose together over technology. Together over technology. I know families who have baskets at the front of their house where you walk in the front foyer, you put the phone in the basket for the duration of your time there. I've seen other friends at restaurants stack up all their phones in the middle of the table, and the first person to reach for it has to pay the tab, which I think is brilliant. Maybe it's something just as simple as choosing to make sure your phone is face down, though, when having coffee with friends. Sometimes we have to choose together over technology. It's about being intentional about how we choose to spend our time. Because love takes time. It's not hurried. It's not too busy. It slows down. It breathes deeply, and it makes time to connect. So take a look at the timer on the screen. Some of you, I can tell, haven't taken your eyes off of it yet. When is this guy done? Let me ask you this. When the timer runs out, ultimately, what really matters? What would it look like in the next day, week, month, or year to prioritize the things that matter most to us? Or maybe more pointedly, what would need to change? What do I need to say no to in order to say yes to love? To say yes to God, to say yes to the way of Jesus. How could the next 24 hours be different? Or maybe not even that. How could the next 24 hours be better than the last 24 hours? Love takes time. Imagine waking up every morning and deciding to be intentional with that day, because each and every day is a gift. Look around you. This community is a gift. Your families are a gift. And how easily we just blow past that because we have to do one more thing. Let's face it, time is slipping away. You know it. I know it. Let's be intentional about choosing the best over the good. Let's pray. God, thank you that your love takes time, that you pursue us, you draw near to us time and time again. Thank you that you don't just simply command us to live a certain way, but you modeled it for us. Thank you that in Jesus we see that love truly does. Whatever those names or faces or circumstances are coming to our minds right now, God, help us to be intentional. Help us to do the hard work of saying no, even to good things, so that we can focus on the best things. Thank you for loving us, God, with that kind of love. And we pray all these things in the beautiful, healing, loving name of Jesus. And all God's people said, amen.